Thanksgiving dinner has always been a weird tradition in my family. Not weird because of the food or the people. We're not the kind of family that deep fries a turkey in the backyard or starts food fights over cranberry sauce. No, it's weird because it always feels like a performance. A performance of what a functional family should look like, with polite smiles, clinking glasses, and scripted jokes that everyone's heard 100 times before. But beneath it all, there's this constant hum of tension, like everyone's just pretending. Like we're all reading from a script none of us really believe in anymore. My name's Spencer. I'm 33. I live alone in a one-bedroom condo I bought a few years ago, about 40 minutes outside the city. No kids. No wife. Just me, a decent job in software development, and a cat named Milo who's better company than most humans I know. I guess that makes me the odd one out in my family. My younger brother, Jason, is married with 3 kids. My older sister, Melissa, has 2 teenage daughters and a husband who owns a construction company. They both live in the same suburb as my parents, while I've always been more removed. And that's never really sat well with my dad. He's old school. Worked in manufacturing for 35 years before getting laid off just before retirement. He's the kind of guy who thinks being a man means having a family, mowing the lawn every Saturday, and teaching your kids to ride a bike. I didn't do any of that. I stayed single, built a quiet life, and invested in tech stocks instead of a riding mower. Ever since I turned 30, he's made it his personal mission to remind me, in subtle and not so subtle ways, that he thinks I've failed at life. It's not like I didn't try to connect with him over the years. I offered to take him to a few tech conferences, thinking he might be interested in what I do for a living. He declined every time, saying he wasn't into all that computer garbage. I helped Melissa's kids get laptops for school, and when I tried explaining what kind of specs to look for, he cut me off with a joke about nerd talk. He'd smile while he said it, sure, but there was always a bite behind it. And I always swallowed it down, thinking it wasn't worth starting anything over. Every year, I tell myself I'll skip Thanksgiving. Every year, I drive over anyway. Maybe out of guilt, maybe out of habit. Maybe because part of me still hoped it'd be different. But this year felt different from the start. Melissa hosted it this time. She has the biggest house, one of those new builds with a 2-story foyer and an open-concept kitchen that looks like something out of a home renovation show. I showed up with a bottle of wine and a tray of stuffed mushrooms I knew nobody but me would eat. The second I walked in, I could already feel it. That underlying hum of judgment. Jason raised his eyebrows when he saw I came alone again, like it was some sort of surprise. Melissa gave me a quick hug, then went back to bustling around the kitchen like a contestant on a cooking show. And my dad? He was parked in the living room, watching football and sipping his second beer. He barely looked up when I walked in. Dinner was at 6. We all gathered around the big table Melissa had decorated with pumpkins, candles, and those little name cards like she was hosting a magazine shoot. The food was great, credit where it's due, but the conversation was the same old script. Jason talked about his son's soccer league and how he was already being scouted at 9 years old. Melissa bragged about her daughter getting into some honors program. Everyone clapped politely. Then it came to me. So, Spencer, Melissa said, topping off her wine. Still working from home? Yeah. I nodded, swallowing a bite of turkey. Same company, just got a promotion actually. I'm leading a new project starting next quarter. That's nice, she said with a tight smile. Must be nice not having to worry about babysitters or school pickups. That stung a little more than I expected. I forced a smile and took another sip of wine. I've gotten used to those little comments, those polite digs masked as casual remarks. It's always the same undertone. You wouldn't understand, Spencer. You don't have a family. I was just about to change the subject when my dad leaned back in his chair, rubbing his stomach like he was already too full. Then he dropped the line that would stick in my head long after the plates were cleared. You know, he said, with a smirk I've seen too many times, you're a grown man with no family. What a failure. At first, I thought I misheard him. But then Jason laughed. Melissa tried to hide her grin behind her glass. Even Mom gave a small, embarrassed chuckle like she didn't want to be the only one not in on the joke. I didn't laugh. I didn't even flinch. I just looked at him, really looked at him. His face was red from the beer, his shirt stained with a bit of gravy, and that smug expression of his. It hit me all at once. The years of comments. The dismissive looks. The way he never really saw me unless it was to make me smaller. I felt this slow, creeping heat build in my chest, but I didn't let it boil over. Instead, I smiled. Calm. Collected. Almost amused. Funny, I said, wiping my mouth with my napkin, coming from someone whose rent I've paid for the last 6 years. The laughter stopped like someone had yanked the cord out of the wall. The silence that followed was so sharp you could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the next room. My dad blinked, the smirk vanishing from his face. Jason stopped mid-chew. Melissa's wine glass paused halfway to her lips. Even my mom looked confused. I didn't say anything else. I let the silence sit. Let it breathe. Let it grow. Then I added, that ends tonight. And that was when everything started to unravel. The silence after I said those words was heavy. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just heavy, like a weighted blanket soaked in cold water. Everyone at the table was processing it in their own awkward way. Jason stared at me like I'd just slapped our dad in the face. Melissa blinked in confusion, probably wondering if I was bluffing. My mom opened her mouth, closed it, then looked down at her plate. And my dad, he just squinted at me, like maybe he'd misheard, or maybe his hearing was finally starting to go. I almost hoped he had, for his sake. But I meant what I said. Every word. The truth is, my parents have been living in the same old house since I was a teenager. It's not a bad place. 2 stories, decent backyard, a little outdated, but nothing falling apart. After Dad got laid off at 59, he never really recovered financially. He applied for a few jobs here and there, but deep down, I think he felt humiliated. Mom picked up part-time work at a local gift shop to cover groceries and small expenses, but the mortgage and utilities were a different story. 6 years ago, I stepped in. Quietly. Without any announcement. Without conditions. They were a few months behind on mortgage payments, and I got a call from my mom one night asking if I could help just this once. I looked at my bank account. I looked at the number she gave me. Then I paid it. And the next month. And the one after that. Eventually, I just set up auto pay. I told myself it was temporary, just until they got back on their feet. They never did. They never thanked me either. Not really. It became this unspoken arrangement, like a subscription they assumed came with no cancellation policy. I didn't mind at first. I was making good money, living alone, no big expenses. But the longer it went on, the more I noticed something that gnawed at me, the entitlement. They never asked how I was doing financially. Never once offered to pay back a dime. My dad never even pretended to be grateful. Instead, he kept treating me like a disappointment. Like the fact that I didn't have a wife and 3 kids automatically made me lesser. And tonight, after all those years of quiet support, he had the nerve to mock me, to say I was a failure in front of the whole family like I was some punchline? No. So I said it. That ends tonight. My dad slowly leaned forward, placing both his hands on the edge of the table. His voice was quieter now, lower, controlled. What did you say? I didn't blink. You heard me. Melissa set her glass down a little too hard. Spencer, are you seriously saying you're going to stop helping them? Over a joke. A joke. I repeated, keeping my voice level. Sure. Let's call it a joke. Just like when Dad said I was probably one of those people who marry their computer last year. Or when he asked if I was too scared of real life to have kids. Or when he said my cat was the only legacy I'd ever leave behind. Jason leaned back, arms crossed. Come on, man. He didn't mean anything by it. That's just how he talks. Right? I said, nodding slowly. And this is just how I respond now. Mom finally spoke, her voice soft but frantic. Spencer, honey, can we not do this here? It's Thanksgiving. Please. But it was already done. I stood up and carried my plate to the sink. My appetite was gone. As I ran some water over it, I heard my dad mutter something under his breath. I didn't catch it, but I caught the tone. I decided not to ask. I left after dessert. No hugs. No goodbyes. Just a stiff walk to the front door, the sound of muted voices behind me, and the sharp cold air slapping me in the face as I stepped outside. When I got home, I sat in the dark living room for a long time, Milo curled up beside me, purring gently. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. It was something heavier, an exhaustion that sat deep in my chest. Like I'd been holding up a roof for years, and tonight, I finally let go. The next morning, my phone blew up. First, a text from Melissa. You need to apologize to Dad. You completely ruined dinner. Then one from Jason. Hope you're happy. Mom's been crying all morning. And finally, a voicemail from Mom herself. Spencer, I don't know what's gotten into you. We've been through so much. Your father's old-fashioned, yes, but he loves you in his own way. I'm worried about how we're going to make ends meet. Please call me back." I didn't reply. That weekend, I got an email from the mortgage company. Since I was listed as the primary payer for the automatic deductions, they notified me that the upcoming payment had failed due to account changes. I canceled it. It wasn't some impulsive revenge play. I'd been thinking about it for months. The only reason I kept paying was guilt. Guilt that maybe I was being ungrateful. Guilt that maybe I owed them something for raising me. Guilt that maybe I was a failure, and this was my way of compensating. But that guilt evaporated the second they laughed at me. The next 2 weeks were quiet, too quiet. No calls, no texts, radio silence. I figured maybe they were processing. Maybe they were scrambling to figure out finances. Maybe they were planning to never speak to me again. A small part of me hoped they were. But then Melissa invited me to her daughter's birthday party. It felt like a trap, but I went anyway. It was a backyard thing. Tents, cupcakes, a clown, the whole deal. Kids running around screaming. Melissa was polite but cold when she greeted me. Jason didn't say much at all. And Dad? He acted like nothing had happened. Just sat in a lawn chair with a paper plate full of barbecue and a beer, chatting with one of Melissa's neighbors like it was any other Saturday. I kept my distance. Chatted with a couple of the kids. Gave my niece a nice gift. Books, of course. Melissa probably rolled her eyes the second I walked away. Then, halfway through the party, I overheard Jason and Dad talking near the grill. I wasn't eavesdropping intentionally. They were just loud. Jason said, "So what's the plan now? You gonna ask Spencer to turn it back on?" And Dad laughed. Laughed. "Nah. He'll cave. He always caves." Jason chuckled. "Maybe. Or maybe he's finally grown a pair." Dad scoffed. "Spencer? Please. He's a soft little boy in a grown man's body. Always has been." I froze. The conversation moved on. I didn't. I stood there, by the fence, gripping my drink like it was the only thing anchoring me to the ground. I don't know what I felt in that moment. Rage? Shame? Sadness? It was like all three hit me at once. I left without saying goodbye. That night, I called the mortgage company and had my name removed from the account. They said it would take a few days, but once finalized, they'd be fully responsible for their payments. I felt a weight lift off me. Not all of it, but enough. I wish I could say that was the end of it. That they took the hint. That they learned something. But of course, they didn't. 2 weeks later, Melissa showed up at my door. She didn't text. Didn't call. Just showed up on a Sunday morning, holding a binder and a forced smile. "I need to talk to you," she said. I let her in. She sat on my couch, flipped open the binder, and launched into a well-rehearsed speech. Apparently, the family had come up with a shared financial responsibility plan. Jason would contribute some monthly support. Melissa and her husband would cover utilities. And they wanted me to resume covering the mortgage, just until things stabilized. I stared at her. "Melissa, I already said I'm done. This isn't just about you, Spencer. It's about Mom and Dad. About family. No, it's about control." She frowned. "What's that supposed to mean? You all act like helping them is my obligation. Like I've somehow failed you all by setting a boundary. But I never signed up to be their safety net. And I'm tired of being treated like the family ATM that nobody respects." She closed the binder a little too quickly. "Well," she said, standing, "don't come crying to us when you're old and alone." I smiled. "I won't." After she left, I stood by the window and watched her drive away, my heart pounding with something that felt like peace, and something else I couldn't quite name. But that peace didn't last long. 3 days later, I got a notification from my bank. A large, unauthorized withdrawal had been attempted from my account. Flagged and denied. I checked the details. It was the old mortgage payment amount. I hadn't just canceled it. I'd removed my bank information. But apparently, someone had tried to use the routing numbers from an old statement. Someone who had access to my personal documents. Someone like my father. I stared at the screen, jaw clenched. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just about disrespect anymore. It was betrayal. I didn't move for a while after seeing the fraud alert. I just sat there on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, blinking at the screen like maybe it would rewrite itself. But it didn't. It was real. Someone had tried to pull money directly from my account using old routing and account numbers linked to the mortgage. And there were only a handful of people who ever had access to those numbers. All of them lived in that house. All of them shared that last name. And suddenly, it felt like everything, every act of generosity, every quiet deposit, Every bill I'd paid without complaint had been spit on. The next morning, I filed a fraud report with my bank. They took it seriously, asked the usual questions, froze the account for safety. When they asked if I suspected someone specific, I paused. I didn't say my father's name. I just said, a family member. It's complicated. And it was. Because no matter how angry I was, part of me still didn't want to believe it. Still didn't want to fully accept that my own family would stoop that low. But then I checked my email and found a message from Melissa. I heard you reported a bank issue. Look, this is getting out of hand. We're just trying to keep things afloat. You could have just talked to Dad instead of making it a legal thing. Now you've got Mom worried sick again. I stared at the email. Reread it. Felt my heart sink. She knew. She knew what he did. And instead of outrage or embarrassment or even a simple apology, I got that. A guilt trip. A veiled scolding. Like I was the problem for not playing along with their little scheme. That was the moment I stopped questioning. That was the moment the last thread snapped. I didn't respond to her email. I didn't call anyone. I didn't explain. I just closed the laptop and sat back in my chair, feeling more alone than I had in a long time. That week, I didn't sleep much. I stopped answering messages from friends. Skipped meals. Just went through the motions at work, camera off during Zoom calls, mic muted. My code started slipping, little bugs, missed deadlines. My manager noticed. She reached out, asked if everything was okay. I told her I was just overwhelmed. She said I should take a few days. I didn't argue. I thought about driving somewhere, just packing a bag and disappearing for a while. But I didn't even know where I'd go. I didn't want a vacation. I wanted a reset. One night, I sat on my couch, Milo curled up in my lap, and just let it all out. The anger, the sadness, the confusion, the deep, gnawing ache of realizing that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had placed conditions on everything. That their love came with strings. That maybe, just maybe, it was never really love to begin with, just expectation. I thought I'd feel better after crying. I didn't. But it helped me see something clearly. I'd built my life around trying to earn their approval. And I was done. The next morning, I woke up early, before the sun. I brewed some coffee, fed Milo, and opened a fresh notebook. I titled the first page, What I Want. Not what they wanted. Not what I thought I should want. Just me. I sat in silence for a long time before I started writing. Peace. Independence. Real connection. Creative work. Meaning. Trust. It wasn't a long list, but it was mine. That was the beginning. The first thing I did was lock down every financial account I had. New bank. New passwords. Two-factor authentication on everything. I pulled my credit report, flagged everything for fraud alerts, and put a freeze on all new lines of credit. It took days to set everything up properly, but once it was done, I felt like I'd taken the first step back toward control. Then I went through my apartment, room by room, and started getting rid of everything that weighed me down. Old files, clutter, useless tech gadgets I bought during random dopamine binges. I sold what I could, donated what I couldn't. It felt good. Cleansing. Like shedding dead skin. Next came work. I scheduled a one-on-one with my manager, Sarah. She was one of the few people I trusted. When we got on the call, she immediately asked how I was doing. Honestly, I said, pretty bad, but I'm working on it. She nodded slowly. You've been one of our top devs for years, Spencer. If you need time, take it. We'll make it work. I told her I didn't want time off. I wanted purpose. We ended up talking for over an hour. I told her I wanted to take on a new role, something more creative, more collaborative, something that reminded me why I got into software in the first place. She listened. She got it. A week later, she transferred me to a new team building an educational platform for low-income schools. It didn't pay more, but it fed something deeper. Outside of work, I started rebuilding my life in small ways. I joined a local running group. I'd never been a runner, but I figured I needed something to get me out of the apartment and into fresh air. The first run nearly killed me. I was out of breath in 5 minutes. But I went back the next week. And the week after that, I took a pottery class. Something about shaping clay with my hands felt grounding. The first few pieces looked like deformed blobs, but I didn't care. I was doing something just for me. No goal. No approval. Just the joy of creation. I reached out to an old friend from college, Naomi. We used to talk almost daily back in the day, but life pulled us in different directions. She was surprised to hear from me, but happy. We met up for coffee, talked for hours, laughed like no time had passed. That one reconnect sparked something in me. I wasn't alone. I just needed to look in the right places. I started documenting everything, journaling, recording little voice notes, even sketching now and then. Not because I thought I was good at it, but because I wanted to understand myself better. For the first time in a long time, I was living on my own terms. But even as I rebuilt, the shadow of my family loomed. They hadn't contacted me since the bank incident. No apologies. No explanations. Just radio silence. Part of me expected it. Part of me still hoped someone, anyone, would reach out and try to make it right. Then, a month later, it came. A letter. Handwritten. No return address. It was from my mom. Spencer, I don't know what's happening anymore. I feel like everything's falling apart. Your father says you're being dramatic, but I don't think you are. I think you're hurting. And I hate that I didn't see it. We've made a lot of mistakes. I've made a lot of mistakes. I don't know how to fix any of this, but I wanted you to know that I love you. Not because of what you do for us. Not because of money. Just because you're my son. I hope you'll write back. Or call. Or visit. Love. Mom. I stared at that letter for a long time. Read it twice. Then folded it carefully and slid it into a drawer. It meant something. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Because while my mom might have seen the cracks, my father was still pretending there was no damage. No consequences. No betrayal. And as long as he did, nothing would change. I was healing. Growing. Rebuilding. But I hadn't forgotten. Because the truth was still sitting there, in the background, waiting. They crossed a line. And the moment would come, soon, when I'd make sure they finally understood what it cost them. I didn't reply to the letter. I kept it, though, not out of sentiment, but because it marked a turning point. The moment they blinked first. The moment the house of cards they'd built, this illusion of unity, respect, and family loyalty, finally started to collapse. For weeks, I kept moving forward. Waking early, running 3 times a week, working on the education platform project with a team that actually respected me, rebuilding friendships and slowly expanding the narrow little world I'd lived in for years. Every part of my life was improving, except one. That one corner of my mind that still burned with the memory of my father's voice. He'll cave. He always caves. That phrase looped like static in the back of my head, taunting me in the quiet moments. It wasn't just the insult. It was the truth behind it. Because he wasn't wrong. Not before. I had caved. Again and again. I paid. I showed up. I swallowed my pride and pretended everything was fine while they chipped away at my dignity. I didn't push back because I didn't think I was allowed to. Because I believed that if I just kept giving, eventually they'd see me differently. They never did. And now I was done waiting for them to learn. They were going to feel it. I didn't want to go nuclear. Not out of impulse. I wanted it to matter. I wanted the moment to stick, not just for them, but for me. I wanted to make a clean cut. A declaration. Something they couldn't ignore or laugh off as another one of Spencer's moods. So I started planning. The first step was understanding exactly how far the damage went. I pulled every financial record I had connected to them. Mortgage statements, utility payments, insurance, tax assessments. I combed through 6 years of transfers, payments, paper trails. And what I found hit me harder than I expected. Over $112,000. That's how much I'd poured into that house. Not counting groceries or the emergency credit card charges Mom made on my account when the fridge broke down or the car needed repairs. Just mortgage and utilities. Just the basics. I sat with that number for a long time. Not because I wanted the money back. I knew I'd never see a cent of it. But because it made something undeniable. I was the reason they still had a roof over their heads. I wasn't a failure. I was the one keeping their failure from being public. And now, I was done hiding it. The second step was checking the deed. I had a suspicion, but I wanted to confirm it. I logged into the county assessor's site and looked up the property. My parents' address. And there it was, in black and white. Joint ownership between my mom and dad. No mention of me. No legal tie. For 6 years, I paid for a house I had no legal claim to. I might as well have been donating to a stranger. That was the last thread I needed to cut. The next day, I scheduled a meeting with an attorney. Not to sue them. I wasn't interested in dragging it through court, but to make sure every possible financial link between us was severed. I wanted to be free. I gave her the full rundown, every document, every email, every connection. She listened, took notes, asked the occasional clarifying question, then leaned back in her chair with a look that was both empathetic and impressed. You've already done most of the work, she said. We'll get the rest squared away in a few days. You've got nothing tying you to them now, except history. That's when I told her the last part of the plan. Because I didn't just want to walk away. I wanted to leave a mark. You're within your rights, she said when I finished. Just be sure you're ready for what happens afterward. I am, I said. And I meant it. The next step? Reclaim the narrative. They'd spent years painting me as the weird, reclusive older brother who never quite fit in. The one who couldn't hold a conversation at family dinners without making it awkward. The one who was too sensitive, too quiet, too distant. And even when I was the one paying their bills, they made sure everyone thought I was barely holding my life together. That ended now. I started reaching out. Not to stir up drama, but to tell the truth. I messaged my cousin Leah, one of the few relatives I actually liked. We hadn't talked much over the years, but I remembered her defending me once at a barbecue when Dad made a joke about me being a stay-at-home bachelor. Hey Leah, I wrote. Hope you're doing okay. Just wanted to clear something up in case you heard the wrong version of what happened last month. I explained, briefly but honestly, what had gone down. I didn't insult anyone. I didn't exaggerate. I just laid out the facts, how long I'd supported my parents, how little appreciation I got in return, and what finally pushed me to walk away. She replied within the hour. Spencer, wow. I had no idea. I always thought something fell off at those family things. I'm really sorry. You didn't deserve that. Thank you for telling me. That gave me the green light. I reached out to a few other relatives, quiet ones, the kind who kept their heads down at holidays. Aunts, uncles, a couple of second cousins I barely knew but who'd always been polite to me in passing. I didn't send them essays. Just the truth. Most of them responded with understanding. Some even shared their own experiences, times my father had steamrolled them, times they'd seen how Jason and Melissa were treated with open favoritism. It was like lifting a curtain I didn't know had been there. And behind it, a whole chorus of people who'd silently noticed what I thought only I had seen. It didn't take long for word to spread. I never asked anyone to choose sides. I didn't need to. The final phase of the setup took shape 2 weeks later. Melissa was hosting Mom's birthday party. She made it clear I wasn't officially invited, but that I could stop by if I wanted to make things right. The message came through Leah, who decided to act as a neutral party. Apparently, Mom wanted me there. Dad didn't. Jason was still upset. Melissa was cautious. It was the perfect opportunity. I told Leah I'd come, but I didn't show up empty-handed. I brought 3 manila envelopes, each sealed and labeled. One for Melissa, one for Jason, one for my father. Inside each envelope was a simple, professionally printed packet. A summary of financial contributions I'd made to the household over the years. Dates, amounts, bank statements, proof. No fluff, no emotion, just facts. Each packet ended with a letter. Not an angry rant, not a guilt trip. Just a clear, calm statement of my decision to end all financial and emotional support, followed by this line. If you choose to see me as the villain in your version of this story, that's your right. But I'm done shrinking myself to make you feel bigger. I arrived halfway through the party. People were milling around the yard, kids running through sprinklers, pop music playing on a Bluetooth speaker. I got a few surprised looks when I walked in, wearing a clean button-down, sunglasses, and the kind of confidence I'd never brought to family events before. Melissa approached first. She looked nervous. Spencer, you actually came. I handed her the envelope. What's this? Closure. She blinked. What does that mean? You'll figure it out. Jason saw me next. His smile faded when I handed him his envelope. You're doing this now? Yes, I said. Now. Finally, I found Dad. He was sitting in the shade, drink in hand, talking to a neighbor. When he saw me, his eyes narrowed. Thought you'd finally grown a spine, he said, chuckling. Guess I was wrong. I handed him the envelope. He didn't take it at first. I set it on the table in front of him. You're not owed my silence, I said. Not anymore. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't stay for the rest. I didn't need to. Because the trap was already set. I knew they'd read those packets. Knew they'd be furious. Knew they'd want to paint me as ungrateful, vindictive, disrespectful. But I also knew something else. They had nothing left to hold over me. And when people finally see who you are without your money, your compliance, or your silence, that's when the real masks fall. And I was ready. The fallout didn't happen in an explosion. It happened in whispers. Quiet phone calls. Side-eye glances. Half-hearted explanations at Sunday barbecues, where people pretended everything was fine while holding manila envelopes they weren't supposed to talk about. And that's what made it so satisfying, because it wasn't loud. It was embarrassing. And the kind of embarrassment my father hated more than anything was the one he couldn't control. See, the beauty of truth is that it doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs to be seen. And the moment I put it in writing, gave it shape, gave it receipts, it stopped being my burden and became theirs. By the end of the party, everyone had read what was in those envelopes. And no one saw them the same way again. It started with Melissa. Apparently, she spent the entire next week texting my cousin Leah, trying to contextualize the documents, spinning them into this convoluted story about temporary support and miscommunication. But Leah wasn't buying it. None of them were. Because I'd backed every claim with cold, hard numbers. 6 years of payment logs, mortgage slips, utility bills, even screenshots of transfer confirmations. Jason didn't say much publicly, but I knew, through the grapevine, that he was furious, not at me, but at my father. Why? Because it was his idea to go into my old files and attempt that bank withdrawal. That's what really buried them. My envelope hadn't just contained financial records. It included a redacted copy of the fraud alert notice. Dates, times, IP address, all pointing back to their home. Jason had 2 kids, a mortgage of his own, and a career he couldn't afford to tank. Suddenly, he realized that whatever game Dad thought he was playing, he didn't want to be part of it anymore. The tension split their golden sibling alliance in half. Melissa didn't fare much better. The silent relatives, the ones who usually stayed neutral, stopped backing her up. At birthdays and holidays, people pulled me aside, asked how I was doing, told me they always wondered how things really worked behind the scenes. They started skipping her invites. A couple of them stopped by my place for coffee. One even asked me to help their son get into coding. But the real fallout? That landed squarely on my father. The man who never apologized, never admitted fault, never once said, "Thank you," even after I paid 6 years of his bills. At first, he tried to ignore it, told people it was fabricated, that I'd made the numbers up, that I was being vindictive. But you can only spin so much when the truth is in print. And when people stopped calling, stopped visiting, stopped nodding along to his tired jokes, it hit him. Not all at once, but slowly, like a roof starting to leak. I didn't hear from him for 2 months. Then one afternoon, I got a letter. Not from my mom. From him. "Spencer, you think you're so smart. So above it all. You embarrassed me. You disrespected your own family. You think money makes you better than us? You're not better. You're just bitter. I don't want anything from you. Don't come back. Don't bother writing." Dad. No apology. No acknowledgement of what he did. Just wounded pride wearing a mask of anger. But I read between the lines. That wasn't the voice of a man in control. That was a man scrambling to save face after the curtain fell. So I didn't write back. I didn't need to. Mom wrote again, a few weeks later. A real letter this time. Honest. Sad. She apologized for staying silent. Said she didn't know about the bank stunt until after it happened. She begged me to forgive her, to remember who she used to be. She told me she was thinking of leaving him, that the house had become too heavy to live in. That letter shook me, because I still loved her, even after everything. And I believed her, because her guilt came from a real place. But I also knew it wasn't my job to save her. Not anymore. So I wrote back, carefully. "Mom, I love you. I always will. But I can't carry this family anymore. I've built something for myself, something healthy, something mine, and I'm not going back to the version of me that made it okay for others to treat me like I didn't matter. If you decide to leave, I'll be here. Not with money, not with rescue, but with support, the emotional kind. The kind I always wanted from you. But I can't come back to that house. Not ever again." She didn't respond right away. But that's okay. I'd said what I needed to say. The final blow came a few weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon. I was at the park with Milo in his little cat backpack. Don't judge, he loves it, when Leah called. "Hey," she said, trying to sound casual. "You're not gonna believe this." "What?" "Your parents sold the house." I stopped walking. "What?" "Yup. Listed it last week. Underpriced it too. Probably just wanted it gone fast." I didn't say anything for a second. "And guess where your dad is staying now?" "Where?" "Jason's basement." I laughed. I couldn't help it. Not out of cruelty, but out of the absurdity. The man who spent his life looking down on me. mocking my independence, sneering at my loner lifestyle, was now living in his son's basement because the people he thought he could leech off forever finally walked away. Leah chuckled too. Melissa won't take him. Said she's too busy. Your mom moved into an apartment across town. Smaller, but nice. Looks like she might actually be happy. I let the moment sink in. Then I sat on a bench, unzipped Milo's backpack, and let him hop out onto my lap. There it was. Not some big, cinematic ending. No courtroom scene. No tearful confessions. Just quiet consequences. Real ones. I'd stopped being the family's emotional punching bag. I'd told the truth. I'd walked away. And now, they were sitting in the mess they'd made, while I finally had a life that felt like mine. I didn't need revenge in the traditional sense. No flames. No screaming. No grand finale. I just needed one thing. Freedom. And I got it. He'll cave, my father said. He was wrong.